Well, joining me now to discuss this further is Tristan Cabello, a senior lecturer in American history at Johns Hopkins University. He joins me now live from Washington. Dr. Cabello, thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. The Memphis police chief said they've timed the release of this video so people coming home from work and school aren't disrupted. What do you think that says about the size of the response that they're expecting to this video?
You know what was happening today in America? I mean, it was really truly we were under the impression that we were living a historical day. I mean, the media, the family, the government was preparing the population for the release of this video, which has been, as the reporter just said, described as appalling. I mean, the chief of police in Memphis actually described it as defying humanity. So it seems like that this video is going to be even much more graphic than what we saw for George Floyd, that it was resembled what we saw for Rodney King in 1995, and potentially will lead to a lot of protests in several cities in the United States.
I want to talk more about the officers arrested. All 5 of these men were black, and all of them have been fired, arrested, and charged within 3 weeks of the incident taking place. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the fact that the officers who killed Nichols were black doesn't really undermine the points, you know, that the movement like Black Lives Matter was making just a couple of years ago. The fact that racism is not individualized, it's systemic. And so diversifying the police force, or the workforce for that matter, I mean, is not going to end racism, because racism is inherent to many organizations, many institutions in the United States. And so now, and to prove that further, I mean, you are right, those 5 police officers, all black, were actually prosecuted swiftly, contrary to the white police officers who killed George Floyd. So I think that now maybe we need to go back to what the Black Lives Matter movement was telling us, that the problem may not be racism. The problem is funding the police or defunding the police. The Black Lives Matter movement wanted less money for the police and maybe more money for educators, teachers, organizers, healthcare, social work that could teach us how to dismantle systemic racism.
The idea of defunding the police, though, has not really gone down that well in Washington, has it? It's been a very, very divisive word, the word defund in itself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the problem with the United States is that the country is entirely decentralized. And so in Washington, D.C., at the federal level, there's so much that you can do. It's actually in every localities, at the state level, at the city level, that things can change. And so a few things have changed in California, in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, in Chicago. But it's true that we need systemic reform, and this will require much more push from local authorities.
A lot of those changes, though, have happened in liberal-held cities. Do you think that change needs to be replicated across the entire country, though, not just in the areas that vote blue, but across the entirety of the United States?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What's different about the situation today is that this is happening in a southern state, a predominantly red state, you know, where things are different, where the police is very much supported. And so, for example, what we have been discovered is that there are many wrongdoings and many things that have been going on in Memphis that we didn't know about. Some police officers don't have their license. Some police officers have been hired from outside the city, which is not legal. And so there's a lot of things that needs to be done to regulate police departments, especially in southern states.
What would you like to see done then to stop that kind of thing happening, to stop law enforcement being able to get away with those kind of loopholes? What would you like to see happen?
It's not a really quick fix, you know. I mean, we've coming here in the U.S. with you know, a long history of racism. I mean, the country was built on racism. But as I mentioned before, maybe to go back to what the Black Lives Matter movement, to what those young people were telling us in the streets of Washington, D.C., of New York City, of Chicago, just 2 years ago, it's to give more money to social work, to give more money to educators, to healthcare, to organizers, to actually educate people on racism, on systemic bias, and maybe things could go better.
That image from the death of George Floyd, of Derek Chauvin kneeling on his neck for over 3 minutes, was quite jarring. police in Memphis seem to be preparing the public for something potentially a lot worse coming out tonight, and over an hour of footage. Do you think reaction to this video is likely to compare to that of George Floyd, which would arguably spark the Black Lives Matter movement to be a global movement, or do you expect it to be bigger?
It's really hard to say, just like in France, we are in a tired country. I mean, inflation is rising, the cost of energy is rising, people are tired from the pandemic. So I don't know how much and how many protests there is going to be. One thing is sure is that this video is nothing like anything that we've seen before. And just today, there was a lot of releases from corporations, from universities, and federal government and local authorities putting in place 1-800 numbers that people can call to deal with the trauma that this video is going to generate. So this is not like anything that what we've seen before. It's going to be very different. Is there going to be a massive protest after that? It's hard to know. It is true that this morning the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security called every single major police station in the United States in big cities to help them prepare for potentially major protest.
Okay, Dr. Tristan Cabello, thank you so much for joining us there. Dr. Tristan Cabello from Johns Hopkins University. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.